Hey, thanks for joining me. Today, we're digging into a problem that could be hiding right now inside the walls of thousands of homes all across Vancouver. It's the story of a building material that was once super popular, but is now a pretty serious risk for homeowners. Let's get right into it. So, you probably keep a close eye on your roof, your furnace, maybe your electrical. But what about the one system you almost never see? Your plumbing. Because, it just might be hiding a very, very costly secret. And here's why. If your home was built in a very specific window, think late 70s all the way to the mid 90s, there's a good chance it was built with a plumbing material that has, let's just say, a really checkered past. And honestly, what you don't know about it could end up costing you a fortune. So, it's time to uncover this hidden home hazard. What we're talking about is a material called polybutylene, but pretty much everyone just calls it poly-B. So what is this stuff exactly? Well, polybutylene is this flexible, kind of dull gray plastic pipe. Back in the day, it was seen as a huge innovation, a much cheaper and easier to install alternative to the old school copper pipes. Its biggest selling point was that it was flexible, which meant fewer fittings and way lower labor costs for builders. It seemed like a total game changer at the time. All right, so how do you know if this stuff is in your house? It's time for you to become a bit of a detective. Let's kick off the Poly-B investigation because this is the first and most crucial step. Now, this timeline is really key. Poly-B was used from the late 70s to the mid 90s. And guess what? That time frame perfectly overlaps with a massive suburban building boom right here in the Lower Mainland. So if your home went up during that era, you're smack in the middle of the prime risk zone. And we're not talking about a few scattered houses here and there. We see huge concentrations of it in areas that just exploded with growth back then. I'm talking about places like Burnaby, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Surrey. If you live in a big housing development from the 80s in any of those areas, your odds of having poly-B are way, way higher. Okay, so let's get practical. How do you actually check for it? Here's a simple 4-step guide. First, just check the color. It's almost always a dull, flat gray. Second, look closely at the pipe itself for a stamped code PB2110. Third, go look in the easy-to-see places, like under your sinks, near your hot water tank, or in an unfinished basement. And finally, check out the fittings. They usually have these very distinct copper or aluminum rings crimped around the joints. Okay, so you've looked and you've found it. Now what? Well, this is where we get into the really serious part, understanding the risks that are hiding behind your walls. Look, poly-B had its pros. That's why it was so popular. It was cheap, it was fast to install, and it didn't corrode like metal. But, oh man, the cons. They are severe. It turns out the plastic breaks down over time when it's exposed to the chlorine in our drinking water. It gets brittle, and that leads to the biggest risk of all, sudden, catastrophic bursts. Not to mention, it can seriously tank your home's value and make getting home insurance a complete nightmare. And this quote from our source material just nails the core problem. It says the degradation leads to pipes becoming prone to leaks and bursts, often without warning. That last part, without warning, that's the really scary bit. This isn't some slow drip you can catch with a bucket. It's a sudden, massive failure that can flood your home in literally minutes. And here in Vancouver, our famously wet climate basically pours gasoline on this fire. Even a small, undetected leak behind a wall can quickly turn into a huge problem. We're talking significant water damage. And of course, the big one for any homeowner around here, mold. So let's talk about the cost. What's the damage to fix this? Well, the price tag for a full whole house replacement in the Vancouver area can run you anywhere from $3,000 to over $15,000. Yeah, it's a huge expense, but it's often a necessary one to protect your biggest investment. But look, it's not all doom and gloom, I promise. There is a clear path forward here. So let's talk about actually solving the poly-B problem. That $15,000 figure can feel pretty overwhelming, but this chart breaks down why there's such a big range. The final cost really depends on a few things: the size of your home, how complex your plumbing system is, and a big one, how easy it is to actually get to the pipes. Then you've got the cost of the new material you choose. PEX is usually cheaper than copper, plus the cost of patching up all the drywall afterwards. It all adds up. So if you find poly-B, what do you do right now? Here's your action plan. Step 1, get a professional plumber in to assess the condition of your system. Honestly, most experts are just going to say replace the whole thing to avoid a future disaster. You also absolutely have to tell your insurance company. And if for some reason you can't replace it right away, you need to monitor it like a hawk for any sign of a leak. And this all brings us to the final, most important takeaway: the need for you to have a proactive home strategy. At the end of the day, the lesson here is pretty simple. In real estate, it's almost always the things you can't see that can hurt you the most. Being proactive and getting a proper inspection isn't just a good idea, it's your single best defense against a huge, costly surprise like Poly B. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. Poly B is just one example of a material that was once totally standard and is now a major liability. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden histories does your home hold?